Wynona Ward, the founder of Have Justice Will Travel, is available for speaking engagements. Wynona is a survivor of family violence and a former truck driver. Today, she is a courageous attorney who is working to end the scourge of family violence, one family at a time.
I grew up in central Vermont, in a very small rural town, had about 300 people in it at that time. Very beautiful, very scenic, but growing up on a rural back road in Vermont can be really devastating. If the neighbors heard screaming coming from our home, they just turned their heads.
When I first met Wynona in grade school, it was, you don't talk about abuse, that doesn't go on.
The neighbors never allowed their children to come to our house and stay overnight because they knew that my father was a child sexual abuser. My own abuse started when I was 3 years old, and the physical and sexual abuse stopped when I was 11 or 12, but the verbal abuse continued until I left home.
What had happened as she was growing up, I cannot imagine it ever happening to anyone.
The most difficult thing was when I had to watch my mother be beaten by my father. We would all try to stop my father from choking or hitting my mother, and it was very scary because she would pass out and you didn't know if she was going to wake up or not. I met Harold when I was 13 years old. We had a teenage romance, and we were married at 18. And then the money began to run out, so I decided that I would go on the road with him and learn to drive tractor-trailer unit.
We lived in extremely close quarters. We worked in the truck, we ate our meals in the truck, we slept in the truck.
When Harold and I were on the road, I received a call from one of my sisters. She told me that a child in the family had been sexually abused by my brother.
Richard was abused. He followed in his father's footsteps.
It was very hurtful to me because we had been buddies when we were children. But also, what was even more painful to me was to hear what happened to this child, because I could remember going through it myself, and I knew the trauma that she was suffering, and I knew that something had to be done to stop it in our family. I worked as a go-between between the family and the prosecutor so that my brother was incarcerated.
When she began to believe she could do something about domestic violence, she had not even gone to college. So while she and Harold were doing their long-distance trucking business, she was in the back of the cab reading so that she could get a BA degree. That done, she applied to the law school.
I did research at the Orange County Family Court, and I read almost 200 affidavits. Women were being hit and kicked and beaten the same way that my mother had been 40 years before. And it was so upsetting that I was saying, something has to be done to stop this.
What Have Justice Will Travel does is provide women with legal services in their homes where they need it the most.
We're able to sit in these women's kitchens where they are comfortable and analyze their legal situation.
The idea of a lawyer getting in her truck and driving out to victims' homes was outrageous at the time. No one ever did that.
One morning I woke up and find out my husband had been abusing one of my children. I called Wynona desperate. I didn't know what to do. Wynona has been such a support to me. I didn't think it was possible. Everything Wynona has done for us has been free. I don't know if I would have made it, and I just can't thank them enough.
She will never let you see what hurts brutally within, but she will let you see fire and venom when she's on a mission. And by God, she's on a mission.
There's nothing that I wouldn't do to support her. Absolutely nothing. 110%.
We will not stop violence in this country. We will not stop street violence. We will not stop school violence until we stop the generational cycle of abuse.
Wynona has a powerful and compelling life story. She has spoken before academic, legal, and medical groups, and at national conferences.
As a child, my brother and I were buddies, but he followed in my father's footsteps. As an adult, when he sexually abused a 6-year-old child in my family, I did what had to be done. Even though I sobbed for my brother and eventually saw him taken away in chains, I became a volunteer victim advocate for the child. I worked to have my brother incarcerated. I did what had to be done. I knew what it felt like to be a victim. I knew how frightening the justice system could be for a child, and I knew I needed to protect this innocent child, to give her the protection I never had. Spouse abuse, child abuse, and alcoholism were things no one in the community discussed. But for me, it was an always looming family secret. My father was an alcoholic. His paycheck was first used to buy beer and wine. The money that was left over, if there was any left over, then went to support his family. With 5 children, my mother struggled for years trying to feed, clothe, and shelter her children. So I took her advice. I called a neuropsychologist to schedule testing. One of the first questions she asked me was if I had ever had a traumatic head injury. The shock then set in. The pain and sadness began, and the anger came. You see, when I was 14 months old, I was in and out of consciousness at a local hospital for several days with a severe head injury. I had intracranial bleeding and hemorrhaging from my eyes. The doctors were told that I had fallen out of a kitchen chair and that I was brought to the hospital immediately, but they did not believe this. They estimated I had been unconscious for several hours. One doctor wrote that it was as if I had been swung by my ankles with a great centrifugal force for an extended period of time. They were looking for what today is called shaken baby syndrome. One of the first calls I received was from a young mother with 3 children who had been beaten and locked out of her home in the dead of winter. In her bare feet, she had run to the nearest neighbor to call the police, not because of the bruises that she received, but because she was afraid her husband of 9 years would hurt her 3 children. The outcome of my programs have been that few of the women we have worked with return to live with their abusers. What this means is that the children learn that it is not okay for daddy to hit mommy. I have begun to stop the generational cycle of abuse.
Wynona Ward is available for speaking engagements. Please contact her directly for further information.